afternoon. It's a great pleasure and honor to be a part of Explorers family, especially in this fantastic time. I'm so grateful to organizers. I'm so grateful to Armed Forces of Ukraine, which make my visit here happen. To start with, I would like a little bit about my background. I'm a historian, a cultural anthropologist. I worked for many decades in museum field. My grandparents were famous Ukrainian folk potters, and in Soviet times, I was exploring why they create so intensively. They are so famous, but they are so poor. It was in Soviet times. And later on, I started to work in the Museum of Traditional Folk Culture, because for Ukraine, rediscovering its history, its historical memory, its cultural identity was very crucial after regaining independence in 1991. So when Euromaidan events or Maidan took place in 2013, 2014, I became initiator of creating Maidan Museum. So I became its director. I'm a Fulbright scholar at the Smithsonian Institution. So before Maidan and before this war, I was in kind of a very specific bubble, like a holiday. It's a traditional culture, it's festivities, it's everything connected to something in the past, and something connected with the beauty. Everything is great, creative, something our legacy, something from the past. But when Euromaidan events happened, we had to respond to the situation, because Ukrainian nation clearly defines its future towards democracy, towards liberty. And let me start with a bit of context. In 1918, Soviet, Bolshevik, Russian army killed the Ukrainians in Kiev's downtown just for the fact that they were wearing Ukrainian traditional embroidered shirts. Right now they are quite famous all world over because Ukrainians try to put them. The resistance was quite big when Bolshevik Russia occupied Ukraine in that period, and therefore the resistance was quite strong. And as you see on this photograph, the Red Army liberators, they looted Ukrainian archives, museums, cultural centers. And Ukraine tried to protect itself in that period, but unfortunately, Ukraine was not well known. And one of the quite powerful arms was cultural diplomacy, soft power. And in 1919, the Ukrainian young government of Ukrainian Young People Republic sent the choir of Koshets to Europe with the concerts. And in their repertoire was a famous and very popular song which applauded by prime ministers, presidents, kings of European states in that period, and it was named Shedrik. And Shedrik now is famous by its new name. Do you know? It became the most famous Christmas song, Carol of the Bell. It was written in 1902, and there were several modifications later by Mykola Leontovich, Ukrainian composer. And this Koshitsa choir started their concerts with the song Shedrik, which was based on Ukrainian traditional folklore. And in 1919, it was very famous in Prague, famous concert, but Leontovich, the composer Leontovich, was not present at the concert because he was killed a year before by a Soviet agent of NKVD Secret Service in the house of his father in the village in central Ukraine. So it's just a small background what's about Ukraine cultural identity and our fight for freedom in this context. The history repeats itself, and you know what we have right now. We have the military conflict, which we call the war, the large-scale war, which took place on February 2022, but the war started in 2014. And a lot of people ask about the reason why Ukraine happened to be under attack, and it is quite clear for all of us, I mean, in Ukraine, because we clearly declared that we are coming back to our history, to our identity. We would like to be independent country. We would like to revive and pass to our future generations our traditions. We would like to be Ukrainians. And speaking about the later strive of Ukrainians towards freedom, liberty, and European values, we had several revolutions which correspond in the context of revolutions in other countries, so-called velvet or color revolutions. And you can see the picture of Euromaidan. This is Kyiv downtown. More than 8 million people participated in this biggest in European contemporary history protest, which lasted 94 days. And when the war started in 2014 by occupation of Crimea and Luhansk and part of Luhansk and Donetsk region, it was quite clear for us that it's kind of a revenge for Ukrainian Euromaidan or Maidan, the strive of Ukrainian people for independence. And when Crimea was occupied in 2014, a lot of cultural heritage was lost, including several of UNESCO World Heritage List. And under attack appeared dozens, even hundreds of Ukrainian cultural institutions, museums, archives, libraries on the occupied territory. And for us, it's not, up to the moment, it's not clear what's going on there because we have no access. We cannot monitor the situation only due to the social media. But after, on February 24, my family and I was waking up because of explosions. I live in Kyiv, and it was quite clear that the Russian missiles were targeting not only military or civil infrastructure, they were targeting also our cultural heritage, which is the core of my heart and the heart of my family. We all work in the museum, in different museums. And so the scope of Ukrainian cultural heritage is quite vast, it's quite big. You see on the statistics, we have so many monuments, historical and cultural sites. We have quite a lot of number of museums, which holds over 12 million items. And it was quite clear for us that the Russian aggression aims just to eradicate, to just erase our historical memory, our cultural traditions. And they used not only military strategic, but also culture was kind of a weapon in this war. And the results of this policy, you can clearly see due to the statistics, which is not complete, of course. How many cultural infrastructure objects were damaged or completely destroyed, including museums, galleries, theaters, cultural centers, parks, preserves, all those very important venues which preserve, interpret the results of explorations, of research, of human being creativity, especially in Ukraine. But the cultural heritage is not only objects, items, movable, immovable, it is also people. And the cultural sector in Ukraine before the war was also quite developed. And we have thousands of institutions, and the most important are people, cultural heritage capital, and the bearers of intangible cultural traditions as well. And so you can see that hundreds of thousands of people who worked in cultural sphere, some of them were settled, some of them stay in occupied territories, and unfortunately many of them are already killed. And the scope of attack is quite vast. You can see just a very modest estimation how many missiles, by how many missiles Ukraine was attacked. And the scale of the attack on cultural heritage in Ukraine shocked even US President Joseph Biden, who named this war in Ukraine as brutal. And in many situations, they also called this war as a heritage war, or cultural identity war. And here you can see some dramatic pictures of the damaged and destroyed cultural heritage centers. Some of them are quite famous, like in Kharkiv, just Chuyanas. The theater in Mariupol also became well-known world history when people tried to find a shelter here, and there were inscriptions, children, in front of the theater and behind of the children, or behind of the theater, trying to send the message that civilians are here, not military, it's a civilian infrastructure, it's a kind of a shelter, but nonetheless this theater was bombed and more than 600 people were killed. Also you can see a number of monuments, some of them dates 10th, 11th century. AC like Kithian, Polovetsky, Baby in Kharkiv region, very close to Izium. Also a lot of museums, more than 60 already damaged and some of them completely destroyed. But the problem is, this is historical building in Odessa. Also this piano was painted black during the Second World War because local people would like to hide them from looting by Nazi. And so it was restored later, and Ferenc Liszt played this piano, which today also endangered and partially damaged during the recent attack, last year attack in Odessa. A lot of religious sites, not only Orthodox churches, like here, this is a church in the village of Vyazivka, dated 1862, very close to the border with Belarus, and inside you can see a lot of naive artists, local naive artists, painting almost completely destroyed. In the Donetsk region also you can see many of monuments, churches damaged, and here's one of the example in Kharkiv region. There's a church which Russians turned into a hospital. And we have seen during our field expeditions a lot of churches which changed their functionality, and it is against the 1954 Hague Convention. So in this church was tested by Russian army because they came to the village and asked people for the strong building. They wanted to find a shelter and a hospital for the soldiers. But the local residents say, okay, we are a small village, we have small houses. And they have seen the church and they fired by tank, artillery shell, and they had a big hole in the dome. And that is why a lot of icons, a lot of artistic and religious objects were endangered because of water after winter here. Also, some of the examples are not only Orthodox churches damaged, but also some mosques, synagogues, some evangelical church buildings, and here you can see the Ukraine, some statistics about the destruction. But not only destruction and damage of the buildings is an attack to cultural heritage, there is also some evidences that Russia sends special groups for hunt for historical and artistic treasures here in Ukraine, looting them and taking them to non-controlled occupied territory. And here's one of the examples how science, how explorers and researchers help us to resist. Here's one of the photographs from the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab in Virginia at the Natural History Museum, and they help to monitor 30,000 Ukrainian cultural heritage objects due to satellite system. And they they collect documents, and for example, these are two museums very iconic for Ukrainian culture. This is the museum in Kyiv, in Ivankiv, and Maria Primachenko, a lot of her artworks, naive artworks, were hosted there, and it was damaged by intentional missile attack, and it is proved by the satellite monitoring lab. And the HERI Skovoroda, another iconic cultural person, philosopher for Ukraine, it was also intentionally destroyed by missile attack. And there are some evidences, like there are some proofs, there are satellite imagery, and you can compare, comparing the photographs, you can just analyze intentional or non-intentional. So looting, theft, illicit trafficking is a big problem, and we try to also document these facts. This is the example of Kherson. In Kherson, two museums close by, Art Museum and Local Law Museum, more than 20,000 objects were looted from Art Museum and more than 40,000 from Kherson Local Law Museum. 20% of their collection. And here's the video from the same satellite laboratory in Virginia when they documented when the Russian came. It was a kind of a special operation. When they blocked the streets, they don't want no people to see this. And they reloaded the objects from the museums and relocated. And some of the paintings from Khersonat Museum were found later due to monitoring the social media in the museum, Central Tavrida Museum in Simferopol, temporarily occupied by Russia. So in this situation, we had to explore the ways, what we have to do. Such a big challenge. Large-scale attack. No strategies, no capacities on different levels. On vertical level, government doesn't know what to do. On horizontal level, we had to self-organize. We had to develop the strategies, tactical, operational strategies. We tried to learn the international experience in this because we got a lot of supplies, we got a lot of international support, a lot of toolkits, handbooks were provided to us. But our situation was unique in some senses. And so we had to test them, we had to adapt them to our realities, and finally, museum cultural heritage communities quickly self-organized, and they evacuated collections where it was possible. They engaged local people to evacuate collections from the damaged buildings. For example, Maria Primachenko artworks were saved by local people when the museum was set on fire due to a missile attack. And the international support was really, for us, fantastic and so greatly encouraging. And you can see, for example, the first steps when we were needed to get some packaging materials, we need some conservation methodologies, what to do with the relocated collections, because most of them were packed in boxes, and they need some inspections, and new challenges and new threats make them vulnerable. So in this situation, we had to respond very quickly, not depending upon the government, central, local. So we self-organized, and we founded, a few days after the war, so-called HERI, Heritage Emergency Response Initiative. It was our response to the war. So, and I would like briefly to show what we do.
Врятувати мистецтво від війни.
Зберегти цінні музейні експонати намагаються у штабі порятунку спадщини.
Окупанти гатять прицільно по пам'ятках архітектури, по музеях, по наукових установах, бібліотеках, по церквах.
Thank you so much, and we're running out of time. Of course, we have a lot of challenges, and the biggest challenge right now is that uncertainty of the present situation. A lot of people are getting burned out. A lot of my colleagues are being served in the army, and many of them were killed. Some, even museum directors, were killed in the process preparing for evacuation or during evacuation. But we look with a hope into the future, and we strongly believe that, as Marshal McLuhan has said, and it's a famous quote, that there are no passengers on a spaceship Earth. We are all passengers, and therefore we should take our own responsibilities and act as we can. Thank you so much for having me.